Welcome to Teaching Truth. Long lost family. That's been and is the theme for our reflections this week as we've journeyed with Joseph through the exciting and challenging narrative of Genesis 42. Yesterday in our reflections we were looking at the challenges which Joseph brought to his brothers, and of how the hearts of his brothers began to melt and began to mellow and began to reflect upon what they had done. And in our reflections today, we want to think about the conduit that Joseph was, the conduit through whom God worked. See, so far the hand of God, though his brothers do not know it, has been heavy upon his brothers. The rough edge of Joseph's tongue and the very direct way in which he has rightly spoken to them has caught their attention. He's eyeballed them. He's pulled them up. And God has begun to do what only God can do in bringing them to their senses, spiritually speaking. And yet all through this narrative, all through this story, is the fact that Joseph loves these brothers, loves every one of his brothers in spite of what they have done to him. And Joseph is looking for evidence of a change in these men. And he begins slowly to see it. He senses a change in their spirit. And so Joseph wants to be the conduit through which he will show kindness while ensuring that they will return with the rest of his family. And so Joseph chooses Simeon. If you have your Bible open at Genesis 42, you'll read that, to be held prisoner as guarantee of their good faith until such a time as they return with Benjamin, and sends them on their way. Joseph gives orders to them to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. The kindness and the generosity of Joseph was evident here. He was the conduit through whom the hidden hand of God was working, even in these brothers who had lied and who had kept a guilty secret from Jacob, Joseph's father and their father, for 20 years. And so Joseph, in being generous and in being kind, becomes the conduit of the kindness and of the mercy and of the grace and the goodness of God to these men, to his brothers, showing both compassion but also wisdom in his dealings with them. When they discover the money in their bags on their way home, does it look like kindness to them? Do they think it's a trick or a trap? But if you read the narrative carefully, you'll see that this is the first time, at least the first recorded time, that they mention the name of God. They turn to each other trembling and say, "What is this that God has done?" Note that. What God has done to us. The guilt which has been aroused by the words of Joseph makes them see that the hand of God in this act of kindness, and yet that makes them afraid. You know, even God's kindness can make us afraid sometimes. When we are far from him, when we are living in conscious disobedience to him, we can sometimes find no pleasure even in little acts of kindness or evidence of his provision. The goodness of God tastes stale, as someone once wrote to the disobedient mouth. Perhaps it was Joseph's treatment of them that made them reflect on God's goodness to them and their own sin against him. As John Newton wrote, "'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear." And Joseph's brothers were finding that God is both kind and God is both also severe. See, God wanted to bring about a change of mind and heart and life in the life of these brothers, so that this family, this long-lost family, this family could be reunited again. And God, in the same way, wants to bring us to a change of mind and heart and life so that we can enjoy all his favor and all his blessings. And what Joseph is doing here is he is acting as the conduit. He is merely the mouthpiece. He is merely the servant. He shows kindness and severity so that this long-lost family, this estranged family, this broken family can then be changed and then be saved from death and then become a great nation in Egypt. Joseph's kindness, Joseph's act of generosity was a hint, was a reflection of God's kindness and God's severity. The brothers of Joseph, I believe, in these moments soon became aware that their whole lives had been lived under the eye of God. What is this that God has done to us? They couldn't escape it. They couldn't escape the severity of God and the kindness of God. You know, we cannot escape the severity of God. Sometimes God has to challenge us and challenge us real hard. Sometimes God has to speak home truths to us from his word. And yet God's mercy, his kindness, and his grace is everlasting. And perhaps there is someone today who you could show mercy, grace, and kindness to. Be like Joseph. Have those Joseph-like qualities of generosity and kindness, and demonstrate that kindness to your brothers and to your sisters, perhaps even to those in your family who are estranged. Join me tomorrow for our final reflection in Teaching Truth under our theme for this week of Long Lost Family.